last session. We're under track 2. We're on industry tools and resources. And if you're not on the CHAMP, a tool for organizational cybersecurity workforce development, then you could head to track 1 or track 3 at the ahc2021.com. So, but hopefully you will stay in the best track that there is here, and listen to Ralph and Dr. Shea.
And that is totally unbiased, right, John?
That's right. So George, we're ready to go as soon as anytime you're ready.
That sounds great. And so as John mentioned, our last session today is CyberChamp. It's a tool for cybersecurity workforce development. Our speakers are Ralph Lai, Department Manager, Workforce Development and Training at the Idaho National Laboratory. I'm sorry, I guess that's Ralph Lai, my apologies. And Dr. Shane Staley, Senior Industrial Control System Cybersecurity Professional, Training Opportunities and Strategy Lead, again with Idaho National Laboratory. So for this session, we're going to learn about the Idaho National Lab's innovative cybersecurity workforce development model known as CyberChamp. And this model engages industry, government, and academia to provide direct and practical solutions to help solve our nation's security and cybersecurity workforce development dilemma, and provides a return on investment model that can justify your training investment. So with that, I'll pass it over to Ralph Lai.
Okay, thank you so much.
Ralph, I just wanted to make sure, can you share? Yep, it looks like it. Yep, your screen's on.
Yep, you're coming through.
Okay, so you can see the just the one slide, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I guess I'll just leave my video off for now, but thanks for your time this afternoon. The briefing is on CyberChamp model. Give you a little background on myself. I am the Department Manager for Workforce Development and Training within the National and Homeland Security Directorate here at INL. I've been here for going on 4 years. I'm retired Air Force, just dating myself. I retired before 9/11, so that'll give you a little bit of perspective, and worked in the private sector as a program manager for a while. And then I got hired into DHS in the beginning days to look primarily at physical security issues for the nation's infrastructure. Again, was there at the beginning, the Wild Wild West days, as I call it, for DHS. And again, 3.5 years ago, having done some work with the lab and some projects with DHS, I got hired on over here. And during my time with DHS, the threats, and as you know, morphed from, are any more airplanes going to fly into buildings and the physical side of security to now the new threatscape of cyber. And it's been an interesting journey. So before I go further, Shane, would you like to give a little background about yourself?
Certainly. Shane Staley, work for Ralph Lai at Idaho National Laboratory. I'm going on 3 years. I have an extensive background in defense, and from the cyber perspective, from the IT perspective, started out in the IT world, and then went over to cybersecurity, and excited about sharing this opportunity with each of you. I know that this is a passionate concern that I've had for years, both working as a line manager, as a technical manager, and the grunt. So I think this is hopefully going to be appealing and applicable to each of your organizations.
Thanks, Shane. Just verifying that the slide changed. I'm assuming it did.
It
Yes.
did, Ralph.
Okay. So, these are just some, if you want to call them fun facts for cyber, the impacts, the threats. I don't think anybody that's listening in this afternoon, we could call up 1,000 of these factoids, if you will, and the impacts of cybersecurity to businesses and organization, even government organizations. Again, this world is really blossomed and it's really come to the forefront in the last 5 to 10 years. And again, in my role as a DHS employee, working in DC and then leading high value target assessment teams to critical infrastructure, doing assessments, physical and to a certain extent cyber security evaluations and assessments for vulnerabilities. We were really consultants to private sector businesses because the private sector owns most of the critical infrastructure out there. We all know that. And working with their budgets, working with their vulnerabilities, trying to fix things. I transitioned from DC out to a protective security advisor position in Utah and Idaho, and worked closely with the state and local governments, but again, with private sector businesses, sitting down there in their conference rooms, in their offices, working with their security and CISOs, trying to figure out how do we address these impacts, these threats, these vulnerabilities. And as you all know, you address it by the business risk, which the government doesn't necessarily always understand that viewpoint, but it really is about the business risk. You can't protect everything. So how do you protect the most important things to your business to keep it up and running, to keep the revenue flowing? So, that's the mindset I bring to this project. I definitely like to hire smarter people than me. That's why Dr. Staley is here. And we approached, this issue, and we were actually tasked by, lab director to start looking at this cybersecurity as a whole. How do we solve it? And then we got our focus narrowed on the workforce development and workforce educational areas of, what does that involve? What are the issues with cybersecurity, the threats, vulnerabilities, and the education of our current workforce? And there's many different areas. We started, Shane and I started to explore some of the possible issues to narrow down our focus. What was the magnitude of the workforce education issue? Did everybody have the right education? Who didn't? What direction should we head? What was our vector? In any strategy of security, you need to know where you're going. How much energy you put to any specific area. So we looked at standards, we looked at strategies from federal government to industry strategies, where they thought they needed help, where they needed to go. We looked obviously here at the lab. We've got a lot of really, really smart folks, especially on the industrial control system, cybersecurity side, but that overlaps into the IT cybersecurity side as well. So what really was our driver? And there's several different areas we found, but for today's discussion, we're going to stick to the workforce development side. Another area we really explored in questions we asked, if you're familiar with any other training we do out here at Idaho National Lab, we do a lot of training for DHS, DoD, private sector entities. But for the DHS training, if you've ever heard of the 301, or a lot of people call it the red blue training, that's a week-long course here. We also have a 401 course, and we're getting ready to start developing a 501 course. But the 301 course is paid for by DHS. People get to come to it for free, but the target audience is private sector. So the vast majority of every class, and almost every class, people come from the private sector from around the world, but every class is mainly private sector. And we started asking these questions as part of our research. What are your gaps? What do you need to know? Who is addressing the policies and creating cyber policies and they're actually worth something to you? They're actionable. who's got their hands on the technology? Do you get alerts? And if you do, does anybody know what to do with them? How do you communicate different updates and threats to your folks out there? So we ask the questions even in person, face to face with the owners and operators that come to our classes every month, from all over the U.S., from every industry, and from all over the world as well. And it was interesting, the answers we were getting. Part of this audience as well is almost on a weekly, probably every other week basis, Shane and I get a call from a business out there, or even a government entity, but usually a business out there, and they say, Ralph, my business needs training. We need workforce development. We need cyber training so that we can maintain and operate our networks and our systems. And so, of course, the logical answer that we give back is, okay, well, what kind? What are the topics? And a lot of times, and not to be flippant on this briefing, but a lot of times I get a blank stare back at us, and and then they start to smile and they say, "Oh, come on, that training that you do, that's cyber training." And I'm like, well, what? So because I'm looking at the educational part. I'm looking at if you're familiar with instructional design processes and methodologies, I start breaking it down mentally in the ADDIE process or some other systematic process. And so, what do you need? And it's interesting that businesses don't even really know what training. They just want training. And industry has really stepped up in the past 5 years. There's all kinds of training out there being offered, from everything from free to you can pay, $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 to send your folks to training. But is it the right training? Is it what you're actually looking for? So we did our research. We looked at different areas. Again, we tried to take a vector and try to figure out the magnitude. And what we found are three main improvement areas that for the workforce area for education that need to be concentrated on is, organizational cybersecurity posture. They, you all, the private sector and even to some extent, the state and local governments need access to threat information, obviously, but they need to know what to do with it and how to test their systems. Do they have a test platform? A lot of businesses don't. They just implement new patches and things. So, what's the organizational posture? And determining that, what's the competency of their own workforce? Do they have the latest and greatest in education? And if you think they do, or if you're not sure if they don't, what do they need? And how do you minimize the impact of educating your current workforce? There's a lot of effort going in STEM education for cybersecurity, and the universities are looking at their academic programs, and they're trying to create the new programs to get through. But what about the existing people that are out there? What about those folks that have been out in the field that we deal with that come to our courses, the DHS courses that have been out there for 20 years? They're not going to go back for another master's or a PhD in another course. So what do you send them to, and why would you send them to that? Is it even applicable to their job role and function? And then the third area is integrated curriculum standards, because as we're finding out also that a CS degree from Stanford means something different than it means from the University of Idaho. There is no real standard, especially in the ICS, the OT environment, the industrial control systems. A lot of work on the IT side, but even then, there's not a lot of standards. And because of that, and because the businesses have no mechanism to even determine how ready they are, let alone what job roles and functions on the cyber arena they need, we hear a lot, and I mean a lot, more than's comfortable to us. Businesses that say, I just hired this person that just got a degree, a bachelor's, a master's in, pick a cyber discipline, and it took us 2 years to train that person up. Why is that? Why are the people not more ready if they've got a degree to hit the ground running? Maybe I'm not familiar with what my business really needs and the job roles and functions. So we look for tools. Shane and I went out and we look for things, tools, methodologies, processes that could probably offer and maybe fill that gap. create the solution for that problem. And we didn't really find one. So of these three areas, the competent cyber ready workforce, the middle area is what we concentrate on, and was kind of the birthplace for CyberChamp. So that's kind of our solution, at least one solution. It's not the silver bullet we haven't found a silver bullet for anything, but this is kind of what we're looking at as a solution that's in the works. We've done a lot of work on it, but it's customizable because government entities, private sector businesses are different sizes. They need something that they can use, tailor to what their systems and networks look like, and something that gives them that understanding of what their operational readiness currently is for cyber and cybersecurity, what their education gaps are, that they can identify and get their people to, and why they're sending and why they're investing. Obviously for any vulnerability, any solution, even my former job in the DHS, we had to create the value proposition for that CISO or the CEO or whoever was holding the purse strings for your business. There has to be a value proposition. There has to be some decrease in risk and an increase in security, especially when it's compared to your competitors. You've got to have something like that. So this is the starting point. And this CyberChamp is a model and a process. And it's got to be sustainable, a repeatable process, a continuing improvement process to doing it. And again, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor on here, but there's separated into two main areas: your security operational readiness. So that was what we call phase one. First, determining where an organization is. And this where it says current process on the left on the bottom and the notional green check marks are as if a company had taken this part of the evaluation based on the standards that company follows. So we initially started out with CMMC, but we've since modified this area into whatever standards that industry follows. Maybe it's a health organization, maybe it's a refinery, maybe there's a myriad of standards. So we've taken this area to determine where you're ready, to determine the readiness of an organization, and started branching out to the different standards. And then the competency, we call it competency health, seems to ring true to companies that get the health of my people. Oh, okay, the health meaning the educational health. So there's three other phases on this side. First off, determining what your organizational structure is for cybersecurity. Where does your staff fall? What different levels of education do they need? Looking at the individual competency and role alignment, do they, based on this and the actual structure that they're put in, do you have the people? It's interesting, we find organizations don't even realize the cyber tasks their folks are performing, and that they've got maybe one person doing 10 different things and one person doing one cyber task. Maybe they need to hire a couple other people to handle the load sufficiently to decrease the risk. And then the third area, the actually fourth phase of looking at this is matching the tasks, the actual cyber tasks that the individuals do, and based on the structure, and then going over to Bloom's taxonomy as a guide and saying, okay, well, based on that, these are the courses, and training and education that each of these folks should have based on their job roles and functions. And then by doing those and completing and selecting and off a prioritized list of educational options, letting the folks go to those over the course of a year, a month, 3 years. Once they've gone and educated themselves, the look is to then go back to what we call phase 5, but really is a continuous improvement process that your folks inherently, because they're smarter, and I mean that in the nice way, they're more educated on what to do, that these areas, your readiness, should improve. So that's the solution that we find. So again, we found organizational security operational readiness is directly proportional to the workforce educational, or basically competence health. If they're more prepared and they're definitely your processes and procedures are in place. It means your folks are definitely got the latest and greatest training, and if they're at the higher level they are in competency, the more ready you are. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. So, example, I'm going back to the phases. First, finding out and figuring out where you are first. Maybe your initial score was in the reactive area, the third level up to the top level. You go through phase 2 through 4, which Dr. Staley is going to show you what we've done so far with the tool, the automated tool. Actually looking at what your structure is, determining where each of your folks are based on their job roles and functions, and then going through the evaluation and getting them the training that they need, and costing it out, and then them attending that training, and then going back again, that phase 5 evaluation again. Where are they in the operational readiness process? We're based on the companies and who we worked with so far, there's an increase of operational readiness. So this is kind of the theory behind this tool, and kind of a portion of the entire workforce development pipeline that needs to be fixed and updated. This is one portion to start with, to fix that problem question of what do my people need for cybersecurity training and education, and who needs it and why. And so based on that, we're going to show you, Dr. Staley is going to take it from here, at least this portion of it, and show you the automated processes we've already put in place and we've used with businesses with success. So I'm going to stop sharing if I can. Stop sharing my screen. If I can figure out how to do that.
It's either you figure it out. It looks like you got it.
Yep. So Shane. If you're talking, you may be on mute.
Just got it. Thanks. So can you all see this browser on your window? This is
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Awesome. So this is an application that we have automated phase 3. Phase 3 is actually understanding an individual's competencies and role alignment. And the big issue here is when you talk about people's jobs, how do you compare apples to apples? And so we really need to find a way when we match training to a person that, if they work for one company and go somewhere else, has that been wasted? Or how can I compare? In this case, I've got a title on the screen, cyber analyst. Well, maybe in one company, that's the name of the job role, or the job itself. And then maybe another company, it's called cyber 4, cyber 2. And so one of the things that we've worked to do here is we take the NIST Cybersecurity Workforce Framework, and we start with just recording what their current job is, right? So we're really trying to collect this information to be able to provide back to the industry and to sectors. What are the types of roles that are important and needed here, and how do they align to industry roles? So although we've captured the title here, that's really just for data analysis later. So what we're saying is I'm a cyber analyst. So I've already kind of put this information in. I've typed in that, I perform analysis across OT, IT, across the organization. In this case, I actually have the opportunity to pick my sector. So what we're going to do here as well is capture this data so we can feed this back to industries and sectors and hopefully build profiles of help and understanding of how to get better across an industry, across a sector when it comes to workforce development and education and training. So in this case, I've actually chosen food and architecture and food and agriculture. And as you can see here, it's actually just a pick down box that I've already chosen. And so I've actually chosen that. And then I can actually go through and say, okay, based on the DHS critical functions, what am I actually doing? So in this case, I picked supply. And then I've actually said, I actually produce and provide agricultural products and services. And of course, if you look at the other pick options, I could produce and provide human and animal food products and services, or I could produce chemicals, provide metals and materials, lots of things you can do here as a provider. But specifically in the food and agriculture, it might be one of these two. So I'm just going to say in this case that I provide agricultural services. And so I've kind of completed this first screen of really data collection. on the information that we're going to gather and how we can feed that back. So that's just kind of this front screen. But the real meat of this is to take the NIST Cybersecurity Workforce Framework, which has 1,005 tasks, and then some industrial cybersecurity framework work that we have done with Idaho State University, where we've created an industrial cybersecurity category. And we have the 7 categories that are in the NIST framework, and then additional industrial cybersecurity categories. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick on here based on an individual in the organization will be doing this. So imagine I work for a food and agricultural organization, and I'm going to go through this analysis, right? I'm going to click on this for myself. So I'm going to say that I analyze. And in this case, I probably collect and operate. Maybe I investigate, and then I do some industrial cybersecurity analysis as well. So I've picked these 4 categories to start. Now, what's happening in the background, as I told you, there's 1,005 tasks in the NIST Cybersecurity Workforce Framework, and there's 45 tasks in our Industrial Cybersecurity Workforce Framework, and roles associated with those tasks. But what I don't is give an individual 1,020 tasks to choose from, because that would take forever. So we're going to go through the categories, the specialty areas, and the roles to be able to get a subset of what this individual chooses to do or chooses to pick from before we actually give them a specific alignment to competency and to roles. And I'll explain a little bit later how all that works. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into categories and pick that. That then gives me a sub-selection from the NICE framework of each category I picked. I now have subcategories called specialty areas I can choose from. So in this case, I'm going to say I do threat analysis. Maybe I do some target analysis, language analysis, and then some collection operations, maybe some cyber operations, and then some digital forensics, and then in this case, industrial cybersecurity as well. So once I've done that, I can then say, okay, I've gone through categories, specialty areas. Now, what roles are in the framework that attach to those specialty areas that I've chosen? So in this case, I've got a threat warning analyst role that I perform, a target network analyst role, and an all source collection manager role. In this case, maybe a cyber defense forensics analyst. And on the industrial cybersecurity side, I do some analysis there. So now I have a subset of roles that will now produce a set of tasks that align to all these previous selections. So the expectation is, as I'm an individual and organization, I would now have basically this subset of tasks from that I can choose from. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of go through and randomly pick from this list. The idea here is an individual, this might take 45 minutes to an hour. The key here to understand is, if you're familiar with Bloom's taxonomy of progressive learning, if not, I'll explain kind of what that really means, is each one of these tasks are aligned on the Bloom's wheel to where they stand in learning. So think of that in terms of a 100 to 500 level, right? So if I take a 100 level course, I might be a beginning freshman, or 200 level, you know. So as you go from basic to immediate or basic to more advanced training, each one of these tasks is already linked using instructional design techniques to the Bloom's wheel. And so as I'm choosing these tasks, I'm from the framework, I'm actually figuring out what roles I should target, and I'll show you that. But I'm also being able to figure out what competency, from awareness to design, from the lowest component of training, that awareness level, to the highest level technical to design. Where do I sit as an individual? And this is going to be what helps me determine that return on investment for what training I target. So I can also do other tasks. So for instance, you know, in this case, maybe there's something you know, critical that I do in the you know, in the agriculture and food industry. Maybe I've got to do some food inspections, and that's a task that I need to add that isn't already on the list. And we can add that and then go back and map that to Bloom's later. And as we think about this, there's 2 ways to approach this. I can do this based on someone's current role, or I could also use this to create profiles for human resources on what the typical role for a cyber analyst might need to be. So there's lots of ways to look at this, but in this case, I'm doing this for myself. I go through, and now I've got this couple of pie charts here. The pie chart on the left has taken all of the tasks that I selected, all 52 tasks that I selected. And it's telling me of those 52 tasks I selected, which one of these roles do I'm in my daily work do I do the most? So if you look at this kind of off green and kind of lime color on the right, you've got an all source collection manager. So I've got, so I got the right color here. Yeah. So that's 27% there. And then of the kind of off colored green, I've got this cyber defense forensics analyst. So I can see here very quickly that really about almost 60% of this person's job is in two roles. And this analysis is really important because when you talk about training and ROI for what people are doing, we should probably focus on what they do. Another way to look at this that we did is take a look at this small little red sliver. And that small little red sliver is other, but even more important, go one step up and look at the industrial cybersecurity analyst. So this pie graph on the right takes the role itself and the task within the role and says, how many tasks are you doing just within that role? Not compared to all the other ones, just that role itself. So if you notice that the off-colored green one, you're doing about half of the task in that role. But then if you take a look at this other orange one, sorry about that. So if you take a look at the orange one, that's half of the task in that role. And so we're kind of understanding how to actually get ROI from the roles. Now let's take a look at the competencies. Now we're working on the presentation here a little bit, but the key here is to take a look at this competency alignment. And I mentioned that we have 5 competency levels, awareness to design. So we have competency levels. I didn't mention that there's 5, but there are 5 levels. So awareness, support, maintain, implement, and design. And you can see here, 49% of this individual's roles, or sorry, tasks that were chosen are aligned to this maintain competency, which is right in the middle. So that doesn't mean they don't need awareness training or support training or any of these other areas. But if I want to get the best bang for my buck when I help somebody get trained, at least in their current role, we now have an established competency to shoot for. And then finally, the reason this exists and to Ralph's mention of when people came to us and says, what do my people need? We can now provide them a list of training based on this competency area. And somebody says, you know, what do I need in my organization? What do I need for my people? You can have them do this task analysis survey, and we can provide you a specific list of courses. This is a subset of our overall database. But basically, I can take a look at these courses from the standpoint of cost, location, format. Is it online? Is it on ground? So I can really quickly, what we call this industry learning profile, you can take and choose from this what you want and really establish a training and workforce development plan for your entire organization. So we've talked about this from a cyber analyst perspective, but think about somebody as a frontline manager, or maybe someone who is not as technical doing this same type of analysis and understanding what they need, right? So there's going to be varying levels of technical support, but this is a big age-old question, right? What do we need to do across the organization when it comes to cyber training and workforce development? And then finally, we're working on an overall database for this, but currently the way the tool works is you can export out to JSON file. And then at some point in time, you know, if I'm having a performance review, I want to review this data, I can browse out and I can, you know, pull it from my previous location, and then I'm back into the file and I can analyze it or talk about it, have a discussion. You know, Shane, you're way off. We don't do investigate at all. And so that might change my list and my perspective. And I will turn the time back over to Ralph and stop sharing.
So hopefully I'm back on.
Yes.
You're there.
You
We hear
are.
you.
So you can see where we're at right now. You can hopefully see some of the value of what that tool, at least right now, does. A lot of the tool and the process and the model and the evaluation does more than just what you saw the automated process. But right now it's in the paper and pencil mode, the spreadsheet mode of us doing that. We thought some of the biggest revelations would be to the CISOs and the organization, to Shane's point. Wow, we didn't even know. We've had people say, I didn't even know my people were even doing some of those tasks, and they had the discussion was to validate those tasks and to see if the job roles and the profiles actually matched what they thought. And it was interesting that HR got involved and to say, well, maybe this is a better way. If we put, we had a large energy provider. We did an initial pilot with them, and one of the things they came away when their HR department was, wow, they were just not advertising for the right folks. Maybe when we're hiring someone, we need to know that they need more cyber skills than we thought. And maybe that's part of their incentive program to send them to different courses. But HR has increased, the ability for them to obtain and maintain a cyber workforce was huge here. To get the profiles, to understand that yes, money is well spent to do education, especially if it's linked up to other efforts. So one of the things we're still researching with this methodology is, what if you linked this, you did your own internal vulnerability assessment, cyber vulnerability assessment or evaluation, and you link those findings, your vulnerabilities, to the folks, the job roles and functions that are responsible in those areas. And actually took that data and added it to this model, added it to an automated process to say, here's really the value proposition. We're looking at our vulnerabilities, and usually when you do a vulnerability assessment, you're racking and stacking them, and you're prioritizing those vulnerabilities based on, again, in my experience, business risk. You want to eliminate, obviously, the low cost, no cost, easy ones, but you also then want to target the money you do have to the ones that are going to give you the most bang for your buck, decrease the risk the most, and then make the most sense for your organization. So again, wrapping some of that capability into this tool is what we look for in the future. But again, right now it is not a self-evaluation. We are moving it towards a tool, a methodology that can be automated, that any business could download, just like a lot of other products that DHS puts out and other private sector puts out for pay for, to so the business can do it themselves. They don't need us there. Right now, we're still facilitating a lot of this effort, but that's where we'd like to go towards. And I thought I could go to the next slide. There we go. So the ask, if you will, this slide is, we're looking for, obviously we can't do and progress this model and evaluation process internally on ourselves. We need businesses, partnerships, either by sector, corporations that want to help us develop and validate the software that gets developed. We'd like a dashboard instead of just the tool set, the basic tool set that Dr. Staley just demonstrated for you. We think a dashboard that we've done for other different types of programs would work best. So you can aggregate your job roles and functions. You can link them to vulnerability assessments. You can take and prioritize the different the training courses and so forth. That's what we're looking to do with trusted business partners. Validate the process and functionality. Continue to do research that could help industry provide sector learning profiles. So maybe in the long term, the initial solution for maybe not the big dogs in a sector, but the mom and pops, which is probably the majority of any sector, can take a profile and say, hey, this is the training that someone coming into your business and your industry should maintain. Establish baselines, educational baselines based on KSAs, based on this analysis, and based on your industry's standards. Because we know one standard does not necessarily fit all. and form industry recognized cyber job titles. And I know that sounds strange, but again, reiterating, businesses that we've talked to, and we've talked to many, we've gone to businesses where, well, who touches cyber, who has a responsibility for cybersecurity in your organization? And they may have 5 people, but their titles are all the same. They're cybersecurity specialist. Well, who does what though? How do you know that? And if that person leaves, how do you hire someone? So again, these are just some of the outputs we see. I can tell you, every time that we inadvertently either come into this and brief this tool, brief this process, 100% of the private sector business saying, we need that and we need it now. So we're looking for the ask for funds, and we've already invested a good, at least in my mind, a good chunk of money to do the research. We need most of it now for evaluating and then looking for businesses that we can actually utilize and validate the process for and create this dashboard. So the next steps, I think we're looking at a deeper dive into the background behind the model, the methodology, the algorithm, so forth in February. But I may be misspeaking on that. But that's our briefing, and I guess we're opening up for questions. And I will stop sharing.
Thank you, guys. We have one question. This is really probably best addressed offline. Andrew Pedden mentioned that we'd love to have a discussion offline with you, please, as I've recently been asked to help write cyber guidelines, and I want to ensure I'm doing and providing the right thing. Please advise. Thanks. And I'm assuming that your point of contact, your emails or phone number will be given out if it hasn't already been.
Absolutely, we can definitely provide that.
Okay. A question that I have for either of you is the courses that you mentioned as an example on one of the slides. Are those courses that are currently available for businesses to send employees to?
Yes.
And so what is that? Are those private sector or government courses?
We're trying to help, and we're probably part of many different folks we run into trying to get that one catalog of everything. So our catalog involves anything and everything, whether it's a SANS course, Dragos, our own courses, TEACs offered by TEACs, it doesn't matter. If it addresses a subject, we collect it and get as much information on it, and we put it in our catalog.
I guess I was surprised that there were as many courses and as specialized as there were. That sounds pretty good, but you're saying that unless businesses know specifically what courses best deal with that employee's tasks, they're really just grasping at straws.
Yeah, they could be definitely wasting their money.
Understand. Any other questions that come up? One question I have too is for either Ralph or Dr. Shane is what do you find typically when you say you do vulnerability assessments in the cyber world? What typically comes out or stands out in terms of their ability to deal with cyber threats and to also address it, posture the company to less likely make them vulnerable for future threats? I know mostly it's human related, but I wonder if you could expand upon that.
That's a big question, and it really varies by company. Mainly the understanding of even the simple things. We still find people that attend the DHS courses we hold here in this day and age. We still find people that come to our courses and that first morning, as we start the dialogue of what the course is about and why it's needed, there are still more than a handful of people in those courses that, yeah, we got this. No one's going to get into our system. We're not vulnerable. And usually by the end of that first day, their eyes are as big as saucers and like, we had no idea. So, you know, the specific answer to your question, I think, is very complicated and it varies. But a common thread that we see is, again, lack of awareness that we ask simple questions. Do you know what your networks and systems look like? Have you actually mapped them out? We still, 50% or more of the class, nope, have no idea, or it's old. And they have no idea what they're connected to outside their own networks. I'm not sure if that really answered your question. It's just you asked a pretty large question.
Yeah, I understand.
George, I can weigh in a little bit on that.
Yeah, please do.
From the standpoint of the way the model is built, we believe that it was really kind of, built for any size of organization, from mom and pop to large enterprise. And so the measurement areas are really, where are you at in your security program? What policy and artifacts do you have in place in documentation? And what security practices are you actually living? And so one of the key things that I think sometimes gets organizations a little bit in trouble is this comparative thing, right? I came and got audited by organization X and they said I was this rank. Well, that can be a little bit deceiving because that's not necessarily a continuous measurement model. And so the key here is to take a look at where you're at and then measure the competencies of your people. And so to your point, almost, it's a huge percentage. I can't give you an exact number, but almost everything really that happens in a system is these days, especially when you talk about operations, it's human error, right? Intentional or non-intentional. And so competency and the competency of your people, regardless of what vulnerability it is, to Ralph's point, if we can measure what those are, we can start building these standards. I think we can start coming up with a better answer to questions like these in conferences in the future, because we'll know what those mappings are. And I think right now it's a little bit shameful, right? And this is another part of the model. We're not expecting them to do this and give away any of the information. We're not an auditing organization. We're there for help and assistance. So what you tell us, so to speak, is like Vegas, right? We're not going anywhere with it. And so it's a little bit maybe embarrassing to say, wow, I'm only in this station. But then you can map out your own self-improvement and realize that it lies on your people and how to do that. So that was kind of a long-winded answer, but maybe that was helpful.
No, that is helpful. I was involved with infrastructure survey tools with DHS on assessments. And from a physical security side of the house, it's easy to compare, for example, hospital A with hospitals throughout the nation with respect to guns, gates, and guards. And I'm wondering if ultimately, do you think that would be the goal in a cyber world? Where do we stack up in the hospital world, for example, or the food and agricultural? How do we match up to our peers with respect to cybersecurity? Is that something that you think may also come out of this program?
Absolutely. I think when we talked about those profiles that we hope we can provide for an industry or sector, when it comes to competencies. So even if a business doesn't go through the tool, eventually we can provide some very valuable data. Where do I even start? What is my starting place? What as opposed to doing this from scratch and saying I need a cyber X or a cyber Y or a cyber Z person. What do I really need if I'm this size of business, and what is sufficient, and or am I even close, right? So I think we can come closer to those types of things. I think we're a ways away from, exactly tying that down, but this is one of the other opportunities I think we have as can work with organizations and they're willing to share that data in anonymous form, where we start to build profiles for a sector or for the industry on what does a cyber competent workforce, cyber ready workforce really look like, and then that I think will directly impact I think more the answer to your question on that comparison, right?
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, especially with cyber, the real challenge is trying to stay on top of the latest threats and the latest way, proactive measures and protective measures. It's really tough to try and do that, especially if a company assigns that duty to someone as a collateral duty. Oh, by the way, also keep up on the latest cyber threats and make sure our company doesn't fall prey to it.
I I know I would agree, and having done a lot of those infrastructure survey tool assessments, but having coming from the private sector before DHS, and working with industry, out in the field, I think this is a way to get, ahead of the game. I always love to see industries create their own rules and tell the government, this is acceptable to us, rather than the other way around, wait around and then let the government tell them and get regulated. So this is an opportunity to get ahead of that, start collecting the data on their own by industry sector, whatever you want to call it, and say, this is where we found, these are our cyber roles and functions. This is the level of business risk we're willing to accept, and these are the educational standards we need. So that's my hope, is that industry would want to take this and run with it and create the standards and tell the government what they need versus the other way around.
Well, gentlemen, this is definitely addressing a void that I think the industry recognizes currently exists. So I appreciate you sharing that with the group. And I know you mentioned, Ralph, that the Idaho National Lab Cyber Workforce Development Pipeline is holding a virtual workshop on February 25th of this year between 4 and 5 p.m. There's no cost to participate in this workshop, I assume?
There's no cost whatsoever.
Yep.
I'm not sure that's ours or if that's the All Hazards Consortium port of it, but I know we have follow on, we have workshops, and I think if anyone's interested in participating in the larger effort, workforce development pipeline effort, we have multiple efforts, all free, and we just had one earlier today. With universities, private sector businesses, addressing and discussing, and then actually taking action to create solutions, not just for education, but for businesses as well, and academia. So.
Outstanding. Again, thank you, Ralph and Shane, for sharing your experience and your knowledge level with the group. And it looks like it's a program that is definitely in need for business and industry.
We think so. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
You bet. John, I think that really wraps us up for the day. I know we're a little bit earlier, but I want to thank all of you for participating in this workshop and this summit. I think we had, it's like drinking water out of a fire hose, but it really is an opportunity to take advantage of a lot of experts all within a span of a few hours. Now it's up to us to kind of get some of the takeaways and follow up with some of the information that we received, follow up with the subject matter experts. And please, if you have not done so already, look into being a part of the All Hazards Consortium, the SICE, or Sensitive Information Sharing Environment.